Sometimes during your programming adventures, you may encounter a situation where if blocks by themselves cause problems in displaying or reacting to user input or conditions. I'm going to write a quick program that, based on a temperature the user enters into the console, I'm going to react with a feeling about that temperature. So if we talk about a Fahrenheit temperature input, let's say between 212 and 120, we put really, really warm out. Anything above 212, we put boiling. Anything between 72 and 120, we put hot. Anything between 55 and 72, we put it's nice out. And anything below 55, we put cold. So, as you're designing this, you would say, okay, if it's the value that the user puts in is greater than 212, display boiling. If it's between 212 and 120, an if statement that says really, really warm out. If it's between 120 and 72, say hot, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and copy this and go into Visual Studio. Paste this in here. Again, so we can just keep track of what we're doing. And I'm going to write a few if statements. First, we will take some input from the user. Grab the temperature from the console. Now let's write some if statements to show these reactions. If temp is greater than or equal to 212, console.writeLine boiling. Temp is greater than or equal to 120, console.writeLine if temp is greater than or equal to 72, so again between 120 and 72, Alright, so I think this is right. Let's give it a try. We we will build our application. And run it. So I will type in 212. Oh, well, that's not good. I really wanted to say if it was above 212, it should be boiling, but I'm seeing that I'm getting all of these different outputs. Well, I guess that would make sense, since 212 actually, if you look at each of these if statements, is true when you evaluate the condition. If temp is greater than or equal to 212, write boiling. Well, 212 is greater than or equal to 212. If temp is greater than or equal to 120, show it's really, really warm out. Well, 212 is greater than or equal to 120. That's true as well. And same with 72 and 55, and, well, it's not really what I wanted, is it? So what we can do here is use what's called nested if statements. So there's two ways to go about this. One is the long drawn out way, which I'll show you, and the other is the easier syntax, which we'll go over after that. So my goal here is to only show one statement for the temperature I'm given, which means once I've met a condition, I no longer want to check any of the other conditions. Well, how do you do that with an if statement? If an if statement evaluates to true, it evaluates anything inside the if block. Otherwise, you can use the else statement to evaluate any other condition. So here, what I will do is I will place each of these conditions within another else block. So here, and bear with me while I type, we'll put this statement in an else block. We will then put this same statement in another else block. Same with this situation. And then finally, one other else. So you see here, once I enter a value, let's say I enter 212 again. If I enter 2112, we see 212 is greater than or equal to 212. Thus, I enter this if block. If I enter 211, I go here. Before, after I evaluated 212, it would then go to each subsequent if statement and evaluate that condition. I am no longer evaluating multiple conditions because I have placed those remaining conditions within a larger else block, which will never be hit if the original if statement evaluates to true. Again, I did this same thing, used this same concept with the other conditions. If the temperature is greater than or equal to 120, which means if it was less than 212 or greater than or equal to 120, it will hit this condition. And so on and so forth with 72, 55, and anything lower than 55. So if I run this same application and I type in 212, I see I just get back the condition I wanted, which was boiling. If I go back and type in 55, I get it's nice out. So again, through nested if statements, we're only hitting one condition, otherwise falling back to other evaluations. Now this syntax can get a little messy. C# offers the ability for you to use the else if syntax in order to evaluate these conditions in a cleaner manner. You'll find this in the textbook on pages 150 and 151 for another example of how to turn nested if-else blocks into else-if statements, but I will do it here using my example. I will go ahead and delete this block, move this over, delete this block, move this over, same thing here, move this over. I will leave my else statement and delete the remaining brackets. So if you compare the two, you see we've saved significant space and made the code much more readable by using else-if statements. So let's walk through the logic. Before, we had said that using a if statement along with an else statement, if the condition in the if statement evaluates to true, then it will execute the code in the if block. Otherwise, it will execute the code in the else block. In the case of else if blocks, we're allowing for multiple conditions to be evaluated. It evaluates in order. So first, I will evaluate the first if statement. If the temperature is greater than 212, it will show or execute the values within that if block. Now, instead of falling to the else block, it will go to the else if statement next to evaluate another condition. So if I did not evaluate to true, so if temp greater than or equal to 212 evaluates to false, it now evaluates is temp greater than or equal to 120 as the next condition. If that evaluates to true, it executes the content of that else if block. If that evaluates to false, it falls to the next else if block. Is the temperature greater than or equal to 72? If that evaluates to true, it executes the content within that else if block. Otherwise, it goes to the next else if block. Is the temperature greater than or equal to 55? Again, if that is true, it executes the content of that block. Now, after you are done with else if statements, meaning you don't have any more specific conditionals you wish to express, you can then use a generic else block. The program will then go to that generic else block if nothing in the if or else if conditionals evaluates to true. It will then execute the contents of that else block. If we run this application again, and we type in 212, we see that it's boiling. If we go back and enter 55 again, we see that it's nice out. So no matter what syntax you choose to use, the logic is the same. Nested if statements can allow you to evaluate multiple conditionals and achieve the result you are looking for in your pseudocode.